Dr. Danielle Adams will be giving our presentation tonight, helping us understand some new thoughts about how cultural astronomy, cultural indigenous Arabian astronomy, connects intimately with our dark sky mission. So Danielle, please.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris, and thanks for those kind words. It's been a really great adventure so far over the past year, helping to lead the Flagstaff Dark Skies Coalition. And as a cultural astronomer, the efforts to protect skies that are still dark and hopefully to actually roll back the clock for cities where they have already lost the night. It's a drive that motivates people in different ways. Some people are really concerned about animals and their nocturnal habitats and behaviors. There are direct medical health impacts of not having dark skies. But there are also some somewhat intangible human impacts as we lose the night. And one of those impacts is when groups of people who have traditions about the night sky are no longer able to see the stars that those traditions depend on. And so what I'm going to share with you tonight is a little investigation that I did and presented at a conference in Melbourne, Australia, back in July. And this looks at stars that have official IAU names, and it looks and imagines what might happen if we could no longer see as many stars as we see now. That's here in Flagstaff, but beyond. So we're going to look at that in a moment. I guess the barking behind me is the cue also to mention that I do have fur babies, and you may hear them intrude from time to time. We'll try to keep that to a minimum. Okay. And I do also want to remind everyone of all of the things that are happening for the celebration of the night and the Flagstaff Star Party. So we have, right now we're on September 17th. So we have some things happening even this week. And those things include, let me see, September. Yeah. So Friday, we have a workshop coming up with Jeremy Perez for astrophotography. Saturday, I'm going to be doing stargazing and cultural astronomy at the Americana Motor Lodge. That takes us then into next week. And next week, of course, is the week of the Flagstaff Star Party, but we also have other things surrounding that. On Tuesday next week, Mother Road Brewing Company is re-releasing their Skylight City beer, which is awesome. And that is in honor of the old nickname of Flagstaff as Skylight City. I am still working where I can to revive that nickname for Flagstaff. And so that happens Tuesday next week. The Star Party is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then we go into the following week and we have stargazing at Mother Road on October 1st. Another astrophotography workshop on the 3rd. And then we get into our Dark Sky speaker series the following 2 weekends. So there really is quite a lot beyond just the Flagstaff Star Party. So, this group here knows where to find all of those events at flagstaffstarparty.org. And I really hope to see many of you there. I know I will see many of you at the Star Party because you're graciously volunteering. So thank you so much for that. Let me share my screen. And all right, that should be working fine. Can you all see that? Okay, excellent. So some of you, I think probably most of you here on this call know that I'm a cultural astronomer. You may not know that for, a lot of years now, maybe 5 years, 6, I've sat on the International Astronomical Union's working group on star names. And last year, we added some new members that gave us enough people to create a whole Arabic subgroup who are specialists in indigenous Arabian astronomy or modern Arab astronomy. And so I lead that smaller group to talk about Arabic star names in particular. So I want to begin here just by reminding us of where the Flagstaff Dark Skies Coalition is. We adopted this vision just a little bit more than a year ago at the board of FDSC. And it says that FDSC envisions a world in which everyone can see the Milky Way where they live. We've talked about this several different times. But the Milky Way really is this great indicator. If you can see the Milky Way easily, you've got thousands of stars. You have enough stars to be inspired, really deeply inspired by the night. And of course, we know that as you go to fainter and fainter stars that you can see with the unaided eye, that really exponentially increases the number of stars in your sky. If you can barely make out the Milky Way, you're probably talking about 500 or maybe a little bit more stars in your sky versus the 2,000 or 2,500 that we see above Buffalo Park in Flagstaff. And those extra stars really make a difference. Of course, under a pristine desert sky, we've got about 4,500 stars on your average night visible without the use of a telescope. And then FDSC's mission, revised mission, which was adopted towards the end of last year, has 3 parts. And the first part here is really a purpose statement built into the mission. And that's to reconnect people to the awe and wonder of a starlit sky. The things we do, the work to try to restore the Milky Way to people's sky, you can ask, well, who cares? Why are we doing this? What does it all matter for? And a key piece is reconnecting people to the sky. This site that even for people like us who live in Flagstaff and we see these brilliant stars every night, it's clear, it's still a wonder every time. I don't really find myself getting bored of it. And it has this special ability to inspire people. And so as we lose the night, we lose that connection with the sky. And so, of course, these other things that we're doing in the mission, nurturing, celebrating the dark sky ethos of Flagstaff in northern Arizona, that's our locally focused mission. And then to educate and advocate for the restoration of starlit skies in other communities, using Flagstaff as a model, that's a more externally focused element. Those things derive from this core idea that it's worth having a dark sky because there is this human connection to the sky that we have been losing as we have been losing the night. This here, of course, to this group here is the well-known image taken of the San Francisco peaks north of Flagstaff under this amazing starlit sky. That's moving. And of course, this is a photograph. This is not exactly what it looks like to the unaided eye, but it's inspiring. And in fact, with the eye, even though we see fewer stars, what we do see has a very different quality compared to a photograph. Nowadays, we see most photographs through computer and phone screens. There are limits to the brightness range that those pixels can display at any one time. Our eyes have a far greater dynamic range. We really see the difference between Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, and the very, very faint ethereal stars of the Milky Way. We see that huge difference much more readily with our own eyeballs compared to a photograph. For our own eyes, we see all of those stars as point sources, single dots. In a photograph, when you get too much light filling the pixel, it bleeds over, and so brighter stars are fat stars. But with our own eyeballs, they are actually truly brighter, not just bigger. And that's an important feature as we look at the night sky. So, of course, this view over the San Francisco peaks is a good time for us to pause and just acknowledge where we stand here or sit in Flagstaff, Arizona. There are many specific tribes who regard these peaks as sacred. They've called this region home for a very long time, all the way back even to the ancient peoples. And so right now, I just want to take a moment to honor them and their past and coming generations who have lived here for millennia and will call this place home forever. Now, I wish I had a deep knowledge of our very local indigenous astronomies. I don't, and that's because I spend what time I can looking at this part of the world, which is the Middle East generally, but more specifically Arabia. There is a long, complicated history of changes in civilizations in the Middle East, going all the way back to Babylonian peoples and Assyrian peoples. And when I lived in Beirut, Lebanon, they would talk about how they've been conquered like 25 times as different peoples have gone back and forth through the Levant, which is, kind of a highly trafficked area because it connects so many other places. But you really have to have a purpose to then go down into the Arabian Peninsula. And although there was plenty of trade done in the coastal regions, and there were camel caravans going all the way across northern Africa and the Saharan desert, a lot of the astronomy of Arabia was rather isolated. And there were traditions that were derived from ancient Babylonian astronomy, for example, but many, many of their traditions were truly indigenous. And so we're going to look at some of those tonight. So this is the sky over our heads. This is a little bit earlier than we would see the sky when it gets fully dark tonight. I gave this presentation initially in July, and so I didn't want to change the whole sky. But you can probably see figures already that you recognize. Perhaps Scorpius there in the bottom right, the W of Cassiopeia on the left. We're going to look at 6 named stars and explore a little bit of their stories. And in each of these cases, dark skies are crucial to the very names of these stars and their stories, but for very different reasons. For example, we're going to begin with the brightest star circled here, Vega and Altair. Vega is magnitude 0.0. It's the standard candle for astronomers. Why would we be looking at Vega in the context of dark skies? You can see it from Phoenix. But the name Vega actually required dark skies. So this is a piece of poetry from a poet, Muhellil, who died in 531, 1500 years ago. And he said, as if the Milky Way of the 2 vultures was a well-trodden path for each group that is spurred on in a caravan. So he is regarding the Milky Way as a road in this case. And he talks about the 2 vultures. In Arabic, the 2 vultures are a nasran, and they are Altair and Vega, as we know them today. They're the 2 vultures because they set together into the western horizon. At roughly the same time, this depends on your latitude because that alters the geometry. Also, we've had some alterations due to precession in the last 1500 years, but more or less they set together into the west. And this is important. There are many stars in indigenous Arabian astronomy, and I would presume other cultural astronomies as well, whose names really depend on seeing the stars in a particular position. And this is one example. The default position to see these stars is as they're setting into the west. So Vega means an-Nasr al-Waqia, the alighting vulture. Waqia is the word that came to us as Vega. And in Latin, we pronounce V's as W's. So we should be saying Vega. We just don't do it right in English. And so that is the word that comes from Waqia, meaning alighting. And it got this name because there are 2 faint stars above it that make this V shape. And you can see them right here in the center of the screen. And it's a V shape reflecting the shape of a vulture who is lifting up its wings high up as it's landing onto a surface, presumably to get a tasty morsel of carrion. The other star, Altair, also comes from the Arabic, an-Nasr al-Ta'ir. And it's the second word again, al-Ta'ir, that came to us eventually as Altair. This means the flying vulture. And it's flying because it also has 2 stars nearby, but they're arranged in a perfect, almost perfect straight line. So these are the outstretched wings of a vulture that is soaring on the thermals high above the ground. So these are the 2 vultures. Now, if we look at the magnitudes of these stars, again, Vega is our standard candle of 0.0. And the higher the number, of course, the fainter the star is. So the general limits of naked eye visibility is 6 or 6.5 if you have really great vision. So if we look at Altair, the main star itself, Altair is 0.8, and its 2 side stars are second and third magnitudes. So moderately bright stars. For Vega, though, one of its wing stars is magnitude 4.3, and the other is magnitude 5. If you cannot see these two stars that make a V shape, you literally do not have the word Vega, because they are not uplifted wings of a vulture that is alighting onto a surface. And so let's visualize that. Under moderately light polluted skies, it all goes away. And there's no Vega. And without Vega as the alighting vulture and Altair as the soaring vulture, maybe they wouldn't even be vultures at all. Maybe they would have been imagined in some other way. So here you have two bright stars that can be seen from heavily light polluted cities, but their names and their stories depend on having dark skies. So that's Altair and Vega. Let's look at another one. This one is far to the north, Al-Ruba. So Al-Ruba in Arabic means the young camel. And specifically, it is a camel in its first year that has been born in the spring. It's a really small newborn camel. This is a very faint star that is surrounded by 4 stars of varying magnitudes, collectively called Al-Awa'id, the camel mothers. And we have other characters in this story. To the right, we have 2 stars that were called Adhan, the 2 wolves. And then to the left, we have our friend, the alighting vulture, also playing a part in this story. And the story goes that the 2 wolves wanted to eat the young camel, and so the camel mothers rallied around the young camel to protect it from the 2 wolves. And then the alighting vulture is also coming in to help protect the camel from the 2 wolves. So a little story in the sky. But the young camel itself is extremely faint. So if we look again at stellar magnitudes, we see that the camel mothers vary widely from magnitude 2 to almost magnitude 5. The 2 wolves are about 3rd magnitude. But the little baby camel, Aruba, in the middle of the camel mothers, magnitude 5.8. So this is really approaching the limits of naked eye visibility. But without this star, there's literally no story. None of this matters, right? There's no camel mothers protecting the young. Without the young camel in the middle, the wolves are not trying to eat the camel. None of the story goes. And so if we go to our light polluted skies, so much of the story disappears here. So Europa is a case of a star that itself is incredibly faint, but central to the larger story. So let's look at another example, and this is a very recent example, Ras Al Nakba. This was approved as an IAU star name in May of this year. I played a big role in that, I'm happy to say, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But one of my favorite constellations to point out at the Flagstaff Star Party, because it's the right time of year, is the she-camel in the sky. And this is it. I love this one. In Arabic, it's called Anaka. And if you can make it out, we have the familiar W of Cassiopeia, but these stars form the hump of a camel. And so this star at the end of Cassiopeia is the root of the tail of the camel. We have legs that go down to here and also to here with a foot sticking out towards the front. Over here in the upper right of the box, we can see a few stars that mark the head of the camel viewed from the side. And then we have a perfect chain of stars that mark a beautiful camel's neck. And if you can't see that, I will draw it out for you. It's a perfect camel in the sky. I love this, and I love seeing it under the live sky. Beautiful camel. Well, if we look at the magnitudes, of course, Cassiopeia is a prominent constellation, second and third magnitude stars there in the hump of the camel. The head is largely fourth magnitude stars, so getting a little bit fainter. But the neck is pretty much fifth magnitude stars, that whole chain of stars. And so under light polluted skies, there's no neck and really no head, and therefore there is no camel. It all disappears and goes away. If we hang on here and look at the camel, though, I want to talk to you about a few brand new IAU star names that are in the sky. The first is Ras al-Naqa, and that means the head of the she-camel. And that is now the official IAU star name for Iota Andromedae, at the tip of the head of the she-camel. The next one is now called Kaf al-Musalsala. In Arabic, that means the hand of the chained maiden. And so this is referring to the Greek figure of Andromeda. And these three stars in the head of the she-camel are also the stars that comprise her hand as she's drawn. So that is now Kaf al-Musalsala for Kappa Andromedae. And then the star at the top of the head of the she-camel is now called Utkadua. And this is Lambda Andromedae. And this star name goes back to a Babylonian figure of a demon in the sky, and this is the position of the demon's foot. And so this is now called Utkadua. And then also in this region, there are two additional star names that were, again, approved in May. The one on the right is Alpharis al-Camel, Omicron Andromedae. This is in the tip of the nose of the complete horse. A Sufi, the famous astronomer who lived about 1,000 years ago, he commented on this figure. We don't know whether he was inventing this figure himself or he was just relating it from someone else, but it's two chains of very faint stars, kind of like the camel's neck, that trace out the figure of a complete horse with front legs and rear legs, unlike Pegasus, which doesn't have any rear legs. It only has two wings and two front legs. And then the other star nearby is Honores, star 7 Andromedae. And this is short for Honores Frederiki. And that was a star name that was proposed by an astronomer, a European astronomer, about 2 centuries ago, a little bit more, to honor King Frederick, who was a Prussian king at the time. And so we have Honores in the sky as a member star of that constellation that had been created. So these are 5 new star names for the IAU. Again, these are not names we have invented. These are names that recognize figures across history and cultures in the sky. So they are now formally placed into the sky in the IAU list. Okay, so we have got a couple more stars to look at. Let's go now to Sebel Rai. This is a odd star name. Al in there maybe tells you there's some Arabic involved, but it's corrupted, as many of the star names are that come from Arabic and pass through Latin and end up looking a bit strange. This here, I'm going to zoom in to Ophiuchus. And the story here starts with a Nasakon, the 2 rows, or the 2 fence lines, if you will. These are asterisms that I never saw until I learned about them, and now I cannot unsee them in the sky. They go through several Greek constellations. So if you follow my cursor here, at the end, we have the bottom part of Lyra or Lyra. And then we're passing through parts of Hercules, one of his legs here and the other leg here. And then we turn the corner at Serpens and go down Serpens and then into Ophiuchus. So several different Greek constellations. But when you go out in the sky, and you can see this tonight, the Milky Way is high. It's 2 rows of stars. Like, why did we never see this before? Well, it's because we have these built-in ideas of the Greek view of the sky. And so we don't see these independent lines of stars. We see Hercules and Ophiuchus. And yeah, that's a literally different way of looking at the sky. So we have these 2 rows, these 2 fence lines, and they make a triangle with a Milky Way. And so if you imagine the Milky Way to be a river, then all of the area inside of this triangle is the meadow, rauda in Arabic. And all of the little stars in the meadow are sheep and goats. This bright star is called Ara'i, the shepherd. And then the almost as bright star, Beta Ophiuchi, is the dog of the shepherd, Kelb Ara'i. And this is where we get the star name Sebel Rai. Again, a little bit distorted through the transition into Latin. So we have the shepherd and the shepherd's dog, and then all of the interior of the meadow are sheep and goats. So the shepherd and the shepherd's dog are moderately bright stars, but this whole thing falls apart when you don't have the Milky Way. There's no border, there's no meadow, because you just have 2 fences in a big open field, and you lose the story again. So here, the Milky Way itself is a critical part of the story. And again, you need some decently dark skies to easily see the Milky Way. Okay, so let's do our last one. And this is a really curious one. This one is, my apologies for the dog behind me. This one is Albelda in the constellation Sagittarius. And let's zoom in here. So this is the star here in wide arc. And nearby, this story begins with the 2 ostrich, I'm sorry, one moment. There are 2 groups of ostriches here called a na'a'in. In Arabic, this form, a na'a'in, means multiples of multiples. So it's multiple groups of multiple ostriches in each group. Now, there are 2 groups of 4 stars here, and they're doing different things. So the group that is inside the Milky Way are the drinking ostriches, the Na'am el-Warid. They're drinking from the river. Again, the Milky Way here as a river, whereas before we saw it as a road or a path. The other group of 4 ostriches are the returning ostriches. They have already drunk from the river, and now they're returning home. Well, their home is over here in the wasteland. So there's this group, this shallow arc of stars, that has our star Albelda in there. We'll get to that in a moment. The shallow arc of stars is the ostrich nest, and it reflects how ostriches actually laid their eggs in the wild. They spread them out wide so that they all can't be destroyed at one time by a predator. And so these brilliant, beautiful white stars are these beautiful white ostrich eggs spread widely. The star name Albelda comes from the Arabic term El-Belda. That actually worked pretty well in the translation to Latin. it means the wasteland. It's an open expanse. And specifically, this was described as an open area of sky here in which there were no stars, or almost no stars, between the nest of the ostrich and these two stars over here. And so this is literally an asterism of no stars. Now, actually, there are some very faint stars, about 5th or 5.5 magnitude stars in this area, but compared to the others, it's relatively blank. So it's an asterism that contains no star in the definition of the asterism. And so, of course, this is really the extreme, right? Because if we move to light polluted skies, it's all going away. But this area of no stars nevertheless became prominent enough to have some rhymed prose developed for it. So I'll read this in Arabic so you can get the sense of the rhyme here. It says, إذا طلعت البلدة خممت الجعدة وأكلت القشطة وقيل للبرد إهدى. So you can hear that rhyme. And my translation is, when rises the wasteland, with wall barley sprouts, the earth is blackened, eaten is clarified butter's sediment, and it is said to the cold, relent. So this is happening in a cold period of time. This is one of some 80 pieces of rhymed prose, and most of them have this formulaic structure. When star name rises, and this rising is at the end of the night as the light of dawn is beginning to spread in the tracks of the horizon. This is a very specific time, visually speaking, that in Arabic was called ghalas, and it means the black of night mixed with the white and red of the light of dawn as it spreads in the tracks of the horizon. All of that in one word. Ghalas. So in practice, I have found this is occurring about maybe the first 10 minutes or so of nautical twilight as you're in the morning. Maybe the end of astronomical twilight. It depends on the geometries of where you are in the season of the year, but thereabouts, maybe between 45 and 60 minutes before sunrise. And so here we have an empty patch of sky. We're looking and waiting for an empty patch of sky to rise as the sky is starting to brighten, as the signal of this period of cold weather. It's marvelous. It's an asterism of no stars, yet it's a seasonal indicator. Here, some interesting notes in the Arabic. That second phrase that says, with wall barley sprouts, the earth is blackened. The Arabic, hamamat, the verb here, is talking about a man's face when it blackens after having been shaven, and the stubble starts growing in. And so the face blackens with the stubble. And so that is the verb that is used to describe the earth being blackened with sprouts of wall barley, which grows in the Middle East in the wintertime. And then, of course, you have the specific phrase at the end saying, to the cold, relent. We've had enough. Be still. It's too much for us. So this is when it's very cold. So looking at stellar magnitudes, again, for this region, as I said before, inside this wasteland area, it's really just 5th magnitude stars, and not many of them. So it is pretty devoid of stars. And of course, looking under light polluted skies, there's no wasteland because you can't see the other stars that would bound the wasteland in the first place. It all disappears. So if we look at this group of 6 stars, we've really had 5 examples that impact 6-star names. Each one absolutely depends on having dark skies for the stories to exist and therefore the names to exist, but in completely different ways. In the case of Vega and Altair, these are bright stars that nevertheless depend on a fifth magnitude star to make the V shape that creates the name Vega in the first place and contrasts it with Altair as the flying vulture. So these are bright stars that have faint stars nearby that give them their own bright star names. If we go to Aruba, that star itself is incredibly faint, but it's at the centerpiece of the whole story that is in that part of the sky. Going to Ras El Nakba, a new star name that honors the she-camel. And again, we lose the whole neck of the she-camel under those light-polluted skies. Heading over to Sebel Rai, again, that star itself is moderately bright, but there's no pasture without the Milky Way. And without the pasture, there's no shepherd and there's no shepherd's dog. The whole thing falls apart. And then as we just saw with El Belda, you can even see here, it's a star name, right? The name is applied to this brightest star in the ostrich nest, but originally it applied to no star, just an empty region of space. And that, of course, is really on that extreme end. So these are some varied examples of the great cultural importance that we have with dark skies. When you cannot see even these faint stars, you're literally losing pieces of your culture. Now, in this case, in Arabian astronomy, there are 12 and 1100-year-old texts that I can pull from, and there's ancient poetry, 1500-year-old poetry that uses these star names. And so these traditions are preserved, and of course they've been continuously written about for long periods of time. But this is not the case for many other cultures that still have oral traditions that are not written down and not permitted to be written down. And so this is the kind of cultural material that we stand to lose if we allow the night to continue to be lost around the world. So that's my little talk for tonight. I hope it was a little bit insightful to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Danielle. Anybody have questions? I have one. When you're really reading prose that describes the sky or the stars in the sky, how are you able to tie that to the asterisms, the empty pieces of sky, the very faint stars? Are there maps or drawings included with the prose?
That would be awesome. No, there are not, but there are. So there are pieces of poetry. There are pieces of rhymed prose out there, and oftentimes collections of many pieces of rhymed prose altogether. But there are other works that include the rhymed prose when they are trying to lay out these asterisms in the sky. And different authors did it for different reasons. A well-known one is Ibn Qutayba, who was living and writing in the 800s CE. And he stated that his purpose in writing this particular book was to demonstrate that the Arabs had everything they needed in the sky before the introduction of Greek astronomy. Because by that point, Greek astronomy was already displacing the indigenous Arabian astronomy. And so he goes through, and he is kind of a cultural astronomer 1100 years ago, trying to reconstruct the night sky as the Bedouin saw it. And so he will, in words, not maps, first start with an anchor star that everyone knows. So, for example, if he's talking about El Belda, he might start with a scorpion. Everyone knows this red star is the heart of the scorpion. And so behind the scorpion is this group of 8 stars that are the ostriches, and behind them is the ostrich nest, and it's in this shape here. And then behind that, there's this empty patch of sky, right? And so you have to read through the text and then with your star chart, figure out where they're going.
I'm
and then often in that context, he will mention excerpts of poetry or rhymed prose that have that star name. And so you can affirmatively connect those two.
I'm just struck by the difficulty I'm sure probably everybody in this meeting has experienced trying to stand with somebody in a dark sky or any sky and point out a constellation before the advent of green lasers. And remember how difficult that was? And you had the sky in front of you and trying to say, oh no, it's to the left. No, it's at 2 o'clock, and trying to describe how many finger widths away. It's very difficult, and you have the sky in front of you. But you're now talking about something which is only in writing, and it's ancient writing, and you have to reconstruct the picture of the sky without having the benefit of a map or the sky in front of you. It's really remarkable. They must have taken they must have recognized that difficulty and given that special detailed care to what they wrote so that you could reconstruct what they were describing.
Oftentimes, but there are also mistakes. I was thrown for a loop in one area of sky because the author had accidentally switched 2 words, and there was a mistake, and so now you have to find the mistake while trying to figure out what they're talking about. And then, at some point, like in the mid to late 900s, you do get a Sufi who created the earliest extant map of Arabian skies, except they're drawn to represent the Greek skies of Ptolemy and correct his figures. But then he also identifies those stars by number and addresses indigenous names for them. So, if you have multiple sources, then you can start to cross-reference these and really identify which ones are being talked about. But again, errors come into play, and you have to work through that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I don't claim that I will remember everything you said, but what's really important here is that as we are losing languages and so much of global culture, I think that recording and maintaining and telling these stories is so incredibly important to really understand the richness of our world and of our world's people. And so I just want to congratulate you for giving this. I won't remember everything you said, but what I will remember is how important it is that we understand and we record and we know about these things.
Yeah, thank you. Wes, it looks like you're in business.
Am I on the air?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just overlaying this wonderful talk with my experience more than 70 years ago out in the backyard with a flashlight and a little book of constellations trying to work out the brighter ones and thinking this lecture would have just blown me away when I was 11 years old, and as it did tonight. So I thank you very much for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I really love talking about this under the actual night sky. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And
Robert,
I just say a quick question. I don't want to go into it in too much depth, but can you tell us what the mission of the IIU committee is? I really wasn't, I know that they name everything, but I didn't know that there was an effort to keep on adding star names. So,
Yeah, so there are several different groups with the IAU that deal with designations and names. Some of you may have been aware of, for example, the Name Exo Worlds campaign that sought public input for newly discovered exoplanets, right? And people would come up with names and propose them. In this particular working group, it initially came together in the 2000 teens, the tens, in order to standardize the spellings of star names that had been used even in English for centuries, but had numerous spellings. For example, Fomalhaut in Pisces Austrinus had like 15 different spellings. And so part of this was to standardize that. And some stars actually had competing names. And so the committee also selected one name to be the name that astrophysicists and astronomers would refer to designate the star in their papers. And so that was the initial impetus for the committee, was to get astronomers around the world saying the same thing. So it was easier to understand and to search for research with the standardized spellings. But as the work progressed, they initially came out with a tranche of 250 star names that were pretty easy to recognize. They had longstanding histories. It was just really a matter of standardizing the names. But there are actually quite a few moderately bright stars in the sky that have no formal IAU name. And there are many stars in the sky that have informal, unofficial nicknames that have never been formalized. And so, once that initial work was done, then there was another tranche a few years later of maybe 100 stars or so. The group set about to start identifying stars, even especially in the southern sky. There are some constellations that have stars designated as Alpha, the brightest star in the constellation, that actually don't have a name. They have a designation. And so the group has a methodology to approach this process of recognizing names in the sky. We don't create new names, and we're not naming stars for people. What we're doing is we're recognizing names. Some of them are historical names that perhaps fell out of use, and so we're grabbing them and recognizing them in the sky. Others are cultural names that are used today in different cultures around the world. Just because there may not be an English name for a particular star doesn't mean it wasn't important to some other culture in the sky. And so it's really, an honor to be able to offer up these names. The total group is somewhere between 15 and 20 scholars from around the world. We have time zones that stretch from, I think I'm the furthest, no, there's one in California. So he and I are the furthest west, and then it goes all the way around to Japan in the time zone. So it's usually 5 a.m. for me when we have these meetings. But we propose names to be formalized and recognized in the sky. We do a little write-up for the group, The group reviews those, and then we discuss it in the group and we come to a consensus. We're not voting these names in. If, 7 people think it's a good idea and 6 people think it's not, then we're just going to put a pause on that and maybe come back to that name later. And so actually in 1 hour, I have one of these monthly meetings where we're going to be discussing some new potential star names. So yeah, it's a really neat process. There are very good things in recognizing star names from other cultures. One thing that I'm always aware of as a cultural astronomer who has a background in anthropology is that in recognizing one name for a star, we are not recognizing other names from other cultures, or even from the same culture, just other names that have been used. And so there is a possibility is to flatten the sky, even though there's more cultural representation. Each star has one name. And so in order to work against that tendency, we are also working on a project called the All Sky Encyclopedia. And this here is it's going to take so many years, but we are gathering this scholarly information about star names from different cultures. And so that will have not only the IAU star names, but all the other names that didn't become formally recognized by the IAU, to really demonstrate the depth and the richness of what we have in the sky.